Hi, I'm Jacob Pyle, the producer, the creator, and the host of the Weekday Edition of the BLAST Newscast. The BLAST Newscast, I'm happy to say, is now in its third school year, folks, of making newscasts. And it's all thanks to you out there, the viewers that watch us every week. At the beginning of the third school year season of doing the BLAST Newscast, I wanted to try in some way to expand the offerings a little bit. You know, God has given me the opportunity to encourage all of you out there about His Word through Teen Blast and through powerful social media sites like Facebook and YouTube and through our BLAST Newscast website. So I thought it would be great to do a weekend edition of the newscast, giving the audience their choice on either watching the Tuesday edition of the newscast that they have loved for all these years, and or the weekend version, which will be posted on Facebook on Sundays because, you know, most kids are home on Sundays, and because church is usually on Sundays, and Team BLAST Ministries is an independently owned youth ministry. There'll be many differences. While Rachel Keller and myself will still be doing the weekday edition on Tuesdays, BLAST Newscast reporter Trenton Byers will be doing double duty as the BLAST Newscast reporter on the weekday version, in addition to hosting the weekend edition on Sundays. While the weekday edition of the newscast will be focusing on one story a week, the weekend edition of the newscast will focus on 2 stories a week, in addition to doing a one-on-one interview segment each week at the end of the newscast. There's so many people I would like to thank for getting me this far. The people that you see on and off the camera, you know, Chris Henry for providing his voiceovers for the newscast each and every week, Kendra and Desi Dahl, and of course the youth pastors of Team BLAST Ministries for allowing me to do this. And more importantly, you the viewers. I'll be back later in the program for the very first one-on-one interview segment as Trenton interviews me for our first show. I'm Jacob Pyle. Thanks for listening, and enjoy the program.
Hey everybody, this week on BLAST Newscast Weekend Edition, God versus the Media. Now, what's the most major influence in life and on TV? Well, the birth of a new weekend edition of the BLAST Newscast, which we hope gets high ratings. And finally, one-on-one interview with producer, creator, and the host of Tuesday edition of the BLAST Newscast, Jacob Pyle. Alright? These stories can be seen on the week's edition, our first edition of the BLAST Newscast Weekend Edition for September 28th, 2013.
Have a blast in God's place. Let's have a blast.
And now, coming to you live from Team BLAST Ministries right here in good old Sharpsville, Indiana. This is the BLAST Newscast Weekend Edition with Trenton Byers.
Thank you, Chris Henry. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our very first weekend edition of the BLAST Newscast. I'm Trenton Byers. BLAST Newscast Weekend Edition will be spent each week covering 3 topics in one 15-minute time slot. 2 stories along with the brand new segment. Well, we'll have more on that later in the program, but first, does bad stuff influence your teens? And how do you get them encouraged and influenced in God's Word? Well, here with our report, God versus the Media, is our BLAST Newscast reporter, Brian Bookout.
Thanks, Trenton. There are many bad things that teens are influenced with these days. For some, it's drugs. For others, it's alcohol. The devil's intention with this is to get people interested with what the kind thing of stuff. Most of the bad stuff that the devil draws attention to the teens is stuff you would find on TV, whether it's violence or porn. God's intention is to keep your mind off these things and focus more on His Word. So here's some things you should remember. Always remember that there are churches and youth ministries such as Team BLAST that are always available for you if you run into these kind of problems. And if you think of something that's too bad for you to say or do, focus more on God's instruction book for life, the Bible. Read a Bible verse every week and keep doing it. That way, you'll be growing more into the Lord, and perhaps you might be doing a good job in encouraging others about God's Word. For the BLAST Newscast, I'm Brian Bookout.
Thanks, Brian, for the report. most cable systems and recent TV models have a feature which can block out any TV 17 or rated R material. For more information, check your user's guide or call your local cable company. Our second story for this week is, as you all know, is the birth of a new program that we're premiering. The birth of this program known as the BLAST Newscast Weekend Edition. Here with the latest scoop about this new program is our BLAST Newscast reporter, Kelsey Gamble.
Thanks, Trenton. This is the BLAST Newscast Weekend. A lot of new changes are in store for all of us, but still a new expansion to the BLAST Newscast. Let me explain some of our changes that are already taking place. Unlike the weekday version, where you'll see Rachel Keller and Jacob Pyle hosting the newscast, the weekend version will feature the same BLAST Newscast reporters except for Trenton Byers, who will be doing hosting duties. On BLAST Newscast Weekend, there are no filter segments, but there are more in-depth interviews and in-depth stories that all in one show, and sometime will be focused on one story a weekend. BLAST Newscast Weekend is stories that will impact your day throughout the day, and now you officially have a choice. Watch either the weekday version of the BLAST Newscast on Tuesdays with Rachel Keller and Jacob Pyle, or watch the all-new BLAST Newscast Weekend with Trenton Byers on Sundays. Whichever suits you most will be the greatest. For the BLAST Newscast, I'm Kelsey Gamble.
The BLAST Newscast now has its own official website. It's at www.blastnewscast.weebly.com. Here you will find current episodes of the BLAST Newscast, catch up with past episodes of the newscast, get to know the people who make the BLAST Newscast possible, and even drop us a line with your questions, comments, suggestions, or ideas. As I said, it's all here at www.blastnewscast.weebly.com. That's www.blastnewscast.weebly.com. See you there.
And now it's time for this week's one-on-one segment, where each week we have a special guest with us who'd be willing to talk to us about certain topics. And since this is our first edition of the BLAST Newscast Weekend Edition, I think it would only be fair if we interviewed the creator, the producer, and one of the hosts of the weekday edition of the BLAST Newscast. I'm only talking about the one and only Jacob Pyle.
Alright, well, hey Trenton, thank you so much for having me.
Well, what do you think of this first edition of the weekend edition of the newscast?
Well, I have to say, this is kind of new for us because we've been doing like the weekday edition for about 3 school years now, because we started back in February of 2012. Mm-hmm. And so, and I think God was telling me, hey, you know what, you've been getting a lot of high ratings, and so why don't you just keep encouraging the Lord more, and maybe it'll give the audience a choice, because, you know, most kids are, you know, churches on Sundays, and we have this program usually on Sundays, so that's pretty much how the weekend edition just kind of, you know, started off.
And how did the BLAST Newscast first have its starting?
Well, let's go back to Appreciation Day of 2012. I had this crazy idea of, in fact, I think we got a clip. I'm going to show a clip real quick as I'm talking about it. But we had I had this crazy idea I gave to Kendra, one of our youth pastors here at Team BLAST Ministries, and of doing a video just showing the kids around Team BLAST. And so I thought, well, why don't we do and show it for Appreciation Day? It got a lot of reaction, and I've had a lot of people asking me, hey, how did you and Mr. No Name appear in the same screen at the same time. And with so many popular, and it was so popular, and Kendra liked it too. She said to me, "I wish there was a way where we can do a weekly video, like a weekly something or other, I think, each and every week." And so I proposed to her the idea of doing this newscast, and it's been going, and the rest is, I guess you could say, history. We've gotten a lot of good compliments, and in fact, one person even said to me once that I should be a news anchor for, say, Channel 13 or Channel 8 or one of those stations here in Indiana, because I'm so good. So.
All right. Is there any other plans to expand the BLAST Newscast franchise?
Oh yeah. Another idea I had was to do like a shorter 3-minute day version, like say on like say Mondays and then Wednesdays and Thursdays, of doing like a shorter. It'll be called BLAST News Brief, and it'll just pretty much showcase the day's news and stuff like that. Wow. So
sounds like you have your plans for the future pretty scheduled out.
Pretty much.
What are your predictions rating wise about this very first edition of the BLAST Newscast Weekend Edition?
Well, Trenton, I gotta tell you, I just hope that they're as high as the ratings I'm getting for the weekday edition of the newscast. The only difference would be, like, say, or it may be even higher, because, like I said, there are a lot of audiences, especially, like, your Sunday audiences that come to, especially your Sunday audiences, because a lot of people are at church on Sundays, so we hope pretty much we'll get good ratings.
Awesome. And for my last question, but not my least, and what would you say to all the kids out there who are bright, who have bright futures ahead of them?
Well, all you have to do is just, follow your heart. I mean, some people want to be singers. People like me who have good voices, speaking voices and stuff like that, are willing to be able to showcase their talents on, like, some local TV station. But, and I even sing a little bit too, and I have a good singing voice. So just follow your heart and just follow what God says, and I think it'll all turn out right. Yeah.
Well, Jacob Pyle, thank you for joining us for this week.
Thank you very much.
Looking for something to do on a Tuesday afternoon? Come up and join us for Team Blast. Our address is 210 South Main Street, Sharpsville, Indiana, 46068. Anyone 6th grade or older is welcome. We're open after school on Tuesdays until 9, with services from 6:30 to 8:30. Come join us, won't you?
Well, that's the BLAST Newscast Weekend Edition for this week. Thank you for joining us. Rachel Keller and Jacob Pyle will be with you Tuesday for the BLAST Newscast. Watch for it Tuesday on the BLAST Newscast website, or you can go on BLAST Newscast on their face page, on our face page. Alright? I'm Trenton Byers. Enjoy the rest of your week, and we'll see you next weekend, because if it's the weekend, it's going to be a BLAST Newscast. Goodbye, everybody.
Let's have a blast.
This is Chris Henry speaking for the BLAST Newscast Weekend Edition. This program has been